Welcome back, everyone, to the Risk Intel podcast, powered by SRA Watchtower, where we share risk intelligence with experts from across the banking industry. I'm your host, Ed Vincent, CEO at SRA Watchtower. Hello, welcome back to the Risk Intel podcast. I am really excited to have Sharon Campbell rejoin the conversation here today. Sharon, thanks for joining us again. Welcome back.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for inviting me back.
As a reminder, Sharon, right, you have quite a bit of experience in the client journey, right? Looking after various different client services, client success, client experience roles over your career inside financial institutions, and now here on the partner side, leading the client services team at SRA Watchtower. In our last conversation, we talked about really driving a client-focused culture across an organization, but specifically within client services. And really, we talked about how you have embarked upon that journey inside SRA Watchtower with our implementation support and client relationship management teams. But we also then talked about how many of those lessons apply equally to the way our risk officers interact with the rest of their organization. So there were some really interesting parallels there that we ran through. Mm-hmm. Today, I think I'd like to drill down into one of these areas in particular, which is implementations, and I'd like to unpack that a little bit. So let's start by kind of laying the groundwork here with I'll say a broad question, which is why are implementations such an important area of focus and attention? Why can't you just in a SaaS organization provide the software, the IDs, and the user guide, and tell the consumer, if you will, or the user, to just get after it?
You can. But I'm going to take you back to our first podcast that we did when we talked about being a client-led organization. Right. And so what you just described is a great example of being a product-led organization, more like self-service capabilities. One, we're a SaaS organization, so our tools are not like Excel or Word, where you pop in the software, or these days you download that or get your login credentials and such sent to you, and maybe 2 or 3 sentences and you go. This is not like an iPhone. So where we are a SaaS organization, we're software as a service, we really try to embrace the whole service portion of that. So a good example would be, if you have ever gone through, and I know that many of us have gone through the process of downloading something and getting the link, and then struggled with either how to use a piece of functionality, and there's no outlet. There is, outside of maybe Googling a possible solution or finding a user group. That's not the experience that we want our clients to have. Delivering value for us is not something that's only done once the software has been implemented. Having a successful implementation provides improved productivity, where you can streamline processes and workflows and workflow efficiencies. It reduces the cost, and having something that is structured so that there's not a lot of hidden costs in the process. And then for us, it's really even higher user adoption. What we want is clients that are very comfortable and confident in using the tool. There's no trepidation. And so therefore, they will willingly fire up and log in and pull data on a regular basis, and not think of it as oh, it's this tool and I've got to remember how to do X, Y, and Z. They don't have to do that.
It sounds like then it's about ensuring that the thesis or the premise as to why the SaaS solution was considered in the first place is truly realized, right? The benefits come to fruition. In one of our episodes a while ago, we were talking about hidden factories, and one of the dynamics is if you license a piece of software, but you don't see it all the way through implementation, right? You get it in the door, you don't and you even stand it up, but if you don't drive it all the way through to user adoption, to your point, and people are still continuing to do work on the side of their desk, the hidden factory persists.
Right.
And so you have to see that implementation all the way through in order to realize those benefits. So you shared a phrase there of being client led. I'd like to return to that phrase, and I'd like you to apply it, if you will, to an implementation. How is this concept of being client led demonstrated within an implementation itself?
Great question. So probably first and foremost for us is ensuring that we truly have subject matter experts, or SMEs, somebody that is a partner in their risk program, not just implementing software, but actually supporting and in some cases assisting to help to implement the risk culture. Something that is called challenge diplomacy, which is, since our experts have been in many of the roles that our clients are in, they are uniquely qualified to be able to guide our clients through that process, and in some cases challenge them when necessary in regards to the maturity of their risk culture. And then something called socialized proof, and that is because they have gone through countless implementations, they are, again, unique perspective on past experience and best practices. Learnings from those clients that have come before the client that they have today, that may possibly have a similar risk program or risk culture, and so they can pull from that past those past experiences and bring a certain level of proof as to why they are providing the direction that they're going in. Another area is, and I think I've said it before, and I do say it ad nauseum, is in engaging early and often. So from our point of what we call our implementation discovery to the process of following up. And when I talk about implementation discovery, that is coming in well before a contract is ever signed and trying to start providing value at that point, which is having a statement of work. Ideally, it's one of those most important documents that a client will be able to have, because it provides them a level of transparency and clarity in regards to what's going to be delivered. If I remember correctly, I think it was a Gartner report that had said something to the effect of 20% of clients that go through and have this very clear statement of work are truly retained as clients, or that their retention increases because the client received that level of transparency and clarity. And then at the other end of that implementation is the follow-up. That is in post-implementation, where we'll circle back to make sure that the learnings that were provided have truly taken hold. See if there's any refreshers that are needed, if it's possibly been over a year. Check in to see if the risk profile that was initially established has changed at all. Sometimes this happens if there's been a merger acquisition, a new leadership, a new CRO is in place, any type of shift in asset class. All of those could mean, oh, maybe I should come back in and take a look at how I structured everything the first time around and see if I need to change it. And our subject matter experts are at the ready to be able to assist them with that.
The concept there of an implementation check-in or a risk profile refresh is an interesting one. We just published an article on this concept of a narrow set of essential KRIs, key risk indicators, as a starting point when you're configuring, in our case, right, Watchtower's ERM module, and that is the baseline. That is where you start. But then it's really important to come back in periodically. We were talking to someone yesterday about, right, their annual review process of going through and essentially, evaluating and those risk indicators, ensuring they are still fit for purpose, potentially adding if the business dynamic has changed a little bit, or removing if an area perhaps is no longer relevant to the business. So it's an interesting thought, if you will, to consider that, right? Implementation doesn't really end, right? It just kind of morphs into a different stage of the life
Right.
cycle, and it feels like that is a fundamental, kind of foundational premise behind being a client-led organization. There, it is not a product that you kind of put in place and set it and forget it, right? It's a constant living, breathing organism, and as the financial institution evolves, so does their use of the tool set. You mentioned, Sharon, a statement of work is an important document, and I think you said that right, when those are put in place, that retention rates increase 20% according to a Gartner study. So that's a pretty significant moving of the needle there. Unpack that a little bit, of leveraging the statement of work, right? Why is that necessary?
So again, as I had mentioned before, it's that level of clarity and transparency and ensuring what you're getting, so that benefit is managing expectations. And it's not just managing expectations for the client, but it also helps to manage expectations for our SMEs. And so walking through and creating a level of milestones, setting some particular deadlines. Sometimes we find out from clients that they need to get the implementation done ahead of an exam, or they need to get the implementation done ahead of some other factor that's going on, ahead of the next board meeting. Whatever the case may be, we need to know these milestones and understand some of these deadlines up front. We also need to understand who does what. And so that comes into play on what are the different departments that may need to feed in and provide some of the implementation. And so therefore, doing it in a silo, whether it's on our side or within the client side, of then springing it on various departments within the organization to say, oh, I need you for X amount of time to help with this implementation. No, creating the statement of work up front means that the client then goes and makes sure that they have secured the necessary resources. Many of those resources are needed for maybe 15 minutes or an hour, but knowing that up front and knowing who you're going to need is beneficial. It also allows us to provide a level of what I would call user validation. And so once the system is set up and you are walking around in it to ensure that, yep, this is what you said that we were selling you is exactly what we delivered, which is why we also then have a sign-off sheet at the end that says, here are the items that we've laid out. This is what we said we were going to deliver. This is what your expectation was. This is what you've now signed off and said, yep, we did deliver. And then from there, then we go into some of those post-implementation, functions that I had mentioned before. Again, following the line of engaging early and often. And I would also add to that is, again, I think it may have been in our first session where the question was, who is responsible for client services and client satisfaction? And I was saying it was not one department and it was not one team, but this is something that spans across. And so this is another area, because if the implementation team is focusing and engaging early and often, they are also very tied to the retention and the client satisfaction, as well as the rest of the organization.
The concepts there of implementation, discovery, then and the statement of work feel really complementary. That the implementation discovery is really aligning on the plan, so to speak, right? Building the plan, and then the statement of work is the way to memorialize that and allow folks to be able to go back and reference that. And maybe there's some course correction along the way, but then you can the concept of memorializing it, right, in a statement of work or subsequent addendums to it, it feels like that is a really key best practice here, as part of this journey.
Actually, and if I can interject just for a moment, one of the things that I think our clients will see is, although they are working and dealing directly with their salesperson, at some point they'll have a meeting and one of our implementation advisors will be attending. And that is that opportunity to really, to your point, unpacking of, do you have your own data or you want to use our data? Do
Right.
you have a strong program already in place? Are there other software tools that you're using that you may want to integrate with our tools? Looking at how they report out on that data, looking at, have they had exams recently and were there particular findings that they need to address? And that's another reason why they're buying the software. The implementation advisor wants to collect any and all of that information up front. And we are doing this level of due diligence and deep diving with the client well before they've ever signed the contract. And that is so that once the contract is signed, we are not now spending the time in understanding the client and understanding their culture and their program and what they have or they don't have. We can actually hit the ground running, saying, because we've already gone through all of this, because we've now created that statement of work that is memorialized as part of the contract, we can now just jump in and start going versus doing a lot of discovery after the contract has been signed.
You have front run my last question there, Sharon, which is around this concept of personalization versus one size fits all, and I think it ties back to your original comment about being client led rather than product led, if you will. That each situation is unique. Right, you have a tool set, you have a playbook, right? You have best practices, but each implementation situation does require an element of personalization. So, can you just maybe close out by digging into that a little bit, because I think each situation is unique, right? As you just said, and so you have to bring a tool set rather than a single tool to the table there. And then with that tool set, you have to, personalize to the institution's needs.
Correct. And being that, again, going back to the fact that it's SaaS. And so if clients say, oh, so we can customize, and that normally makes people's hair stand on end, because in a SaaS environment, there really isn't that level of customizing. We do not customize the software. We have software and we can configure, we can, the term you used, personalize. But we do also understand going into it, every single risk program is different. The data that clients may provide us for the use of our tools is different. The timelines that they have are different. And so therefore the experience between client to client to client should also be different. And so that, again, drives us around circle in regards to being client led, is how we are focusing on that. So no, we do not have customized solutions, not a term that you use in SaaS, but we do have personalized, I guess is possibly then the right terminology, of having those solutions, again, for each one of our clients. We want to go through the process where that level of tailoring is essential. Clients are entrusting us with their risk program. We're not customizing the software, but we're just customizing that experience. And with that, we've kind of circled back to where we started in the beginning, which was being client-led.
Yes, I think that's a great way to bring it full circle. That the importance of being client led, manifests itself in ensuring that when software is licensed, it's seen through to completion, that you do realize the benefits, right? That you get through to the driving adoption phase, and that you secondly, that this is dynamic, it's continuous, right? There is a a check-in to ensure that that risk profile refresh step, as you said, right, that this is still applicable to where you are as an institution. And some of the practices that you shared along the way of aligning on that plan early on during that discovery-led implementation phase, and then memorializing it, capturing it in that statement of work, and realizing that each institution, right, even though this is a SaaS solution, there is an appropriate level of personalization that occurs using the tools in the toolkit to say, right, this is not one size fits all. So that last piece is one that I'll leave our listeners with, because it would be fantastic, Sharon, if you or some of those subject matter experts which you have would come back and apply this in practice and be able to share some specific examples of implementing Watchtower's ERM component, or program risk assessments, or risk and control self-assessments, or even the risk maturity framework, because each of those are probably a little bit different, right? And so there's personalization in the institution. There's also personalization to the solution or the component itself.
Absolutely. And I'm sure that they are just can't wait for me to volunteer for them to come back for another podcast.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the time here today. I'll close with one final comment, which is, you in many moments here over the last few episodes have talked about being client led, and it's not lost on me, for anyone who is watching the podcast rather than just listening, that you've got the core values of SRA Watchtower there over your shoulder, and the first one of those core values is being customer first. So I think that aligns really well. You are really putting that value into practice here with these concepts of being customer led. So thank you for the thoughts and taking us on this implementation journey. And we look forward to having you and the team back to drill into some specific examples in the subsequent episodes.
Thank you very much for having me. This was fun.